Sidechaining is a very important mix tool, especially for electronic and dance music, and it's just as equally as important outside the door as it is inside the door. And what we're going to do is look at different ways in which you can sidechain on the Elektron Syntakt. This can also be applied to the Digitakt as well, and also the Digitone and the Track and all of the other Elektron devices. So it will differ from device to device. But on the Syntakt, I found quite a lot of ways to sidechain. Now, you could just use one every single time, but I think it's good to learn all of them because there might be moments where you can't use a particular sidechain technique because you're already using that filter or that amp page for something completely different. So it's good to learn all of them, and then you can use each one in different scenarios. So the first way to sidechain is one that I use quite often, and that is to basically trig lock the volume on the amp page on any track that you want to sidechain to the kick. So I'll just show you what I've got to start with. We've got a kick on track 1, and we have a bass on track 9. So track 1, the kick is on 1, 5, 9 and 13, and on track 9 we have one hit of the note of the bass, and then it runs through 16 steps, just one long note. Obviously that's problematic because the kick and the bass is clashing in the lower frequencies. So what we're going to do first is I'm just going to put some trigless trigs on 1, 5, 9 and 13. These are going to be used to trigger the sidechain, or in our case bringing the volume down on the amp page. And then what I'm also going to do is put trigless trigs on 3, 7, 11 and 15. And these ones are going to be used to return the volume back to its current state. So what I can do is I can start by doing those ones first. So if I just hold them down and press in the knob, you can see it's locked at 110. Now what we can do is bring these ones down. Let's just start at maybe 60 and listen to what happens. We get sidechaining. Now the problem with this method is that the sidechaining is quite sharp. It's more like a square wave. It's on and off, rather than a compressor which would have a slope like this. And we'll come on to that in a second, and I'll show you how we can get a sidechain sound with the slope, with the attack and the decay, or close to it, using other various techniques on the Syntakt. So what I'm going to do now is just finish this off by adjusting the amount. Maybe I just want a little bit, or maybe I want it to pulse like this quite heavily. I'm going to go for 65. Now there is other options as well, so I am bringing it back up on 3, 7, 11 and a 15. But what I could do if I wanted to is I could copy all of those, delete them, and then put them closer to the kick like this. And then you could always hold them and move them back with a micro timing as well, which will give you a sidechain that's a little bit faster on the release. For this kind of sound though, this track that we're working on, the bass, it works really well when they are on 3, 7, 11 and 15. So let's just put the micro time back up. So yeah, that works perfectly for me. So this second option is probably a better option out of option 1 and option 2. So this is using a Track LFO, and it kind of mimics a sidechain compressor with the sloping of the volume coming back to where it left off in a much more pleasing way. And I'll be honest with you, I use option 1 way too much. Maybe I should use option 2 a little bit more, but I just get a little bit lazy with this thing. So what I'm going to do is just set up the LFO first. So how you do this is you basically need to use the exponential waveform, and you can see if we bring it down, it kind of represents what a sidechain would look like using a compressor. And we need to change the mode to 1. So this means every time it triggers, it just does one cycle rather than repeating the waveform. So every trig will just trigger this once. What we also want to do is put this to 16, the speed, and we're going to put the BPM on 8, I think. Let me just go to 8. So this is a good starting point for the speed of it, and then we can dial this in a little bit more, and I'll show you how that works. The next thing we want to do is we want to change the destination to amp volume. Now that should be set up pretty nicely now, so let's just check this out. And you can see I've got eighths for these notes. Rather than the one long note, I'm actually doing eighths. And then what I'm going to do is just bring this down. And you can hear there's a problem here, because every time a note hits, it triggers the sidechain. I only want it to trigger on 1, 5, 9, and 13. Now, the reason why I added these notes in is because before we was adding trigless trigs in there, but I actually want to have triggers this time. So what we can do is we can go to the trig page and we can turn LFO trig off, and you can see it's not affecting anything at this point. But what I can do is hold 1, 5, 9, and 13 down and switch the LFO re-trigger on just for these notes. Now that's also really good as well if you have quite a complex kick and bass pattern. If you're making electro, drum and bass, something like that, then you can easily go in and just add the LFO trig to the trigs that you want to sidechain. So what we can do now is just operate this setup that we've got. So you can hear that we can change the depth amount or increase the depth amount by bringing down the depth into the negative. So quite heavy sidechain there. And then what we can also do is adjust the speed, and that will give us a much quicker or slower sidechain. So check this out. So that's kind of like having a fast release on a compressor. And then if we go left, we get a slow release. So using the speed, you can decide whether you want it to be quite transparent, or if you want something that kind of pumps and grooves with the track that you're making and the BPM that you're working at. I'd say right there works quite nicely for me. So once I've set that up, what I can do is just decide how much I want in the track. Right there, that sounds great. So yeah, that's the second option, and now I'm going to show you a third option. Are you enjoying this Syntakt tutorial, and would you like to develop your Syntakt skills even further? Well, I do have a 14-hour Syntakt mastery course available, which is split into 4 parts. The first part, the introductory course, is absolutely free, and you can sign up to that by clicking on the link in the video description below. And then following on from that, we go through beginner, advanced, and expert, which will take you through basic sound design right through to the advanced features and loads of tips and tricks, which often people don't really think about. And I'll be pushing the Syntakt to its absolute limits. I will say though, the introductory course is super basic. It's basically there just to give you an idea of how courses are structured in the learning portal, and also to give you an idea of my teaching style, which you are already familiar with from watching my YouTube videos. So don't wait, click on the link in the video description below, sign up, and I'll also send you some offers as well to get discount on the Syntakt mastery courses. So my name is James Orvis, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this tutorial. Next, I'm going to show you how to get a more discrete surgical sidechain for the bass. Now, there's a few kind of negatives and positives of doing this one. The negative is that we can't really do it on an analog track because we don't have the second filter. See on the analog one there, if we go to the second page multimode filter, we get this. Now, it doesn't mean we can't do it because we can still use this filter, but this sound here, you can hear I'm using this opening and closing of the bass. But on a digital track, I could still have that, and then I can use the second filter to bring this filter up. So the idea behind it is that we bring up this filter every time the kick hits. So we're triggering the opening and closing of this high pass filter, which is basically sculpting away the lower frequencies. Now, this is something that I do quite often in Ableton, and I do have a video called The Bass Ducker on YouTube, and that will give you more of an in-depth idea of why I do this and how it works in the context of a mix. So what I'm going to do first is just show you on track 9, the analog one, how we can switch this into a sidechain filter. Obviously, you'll hear a difference in the overall sound, so it's not quite what we're going for, but I'll just show you how to do it anyway on a filter, and then we'll move over to track 5 and I'll show you how we can do it on the second filter pitch using the bass. So we're going to go to track 9. We're going to go to the LFO page, and we're going to change this now, the destination, to filter frequency. What we want to do this time is want to push from the left to the right because we're opening up the filter in a positive way and then bringing it back down. So let's just see if this works. We've set everything up previously on the last option using the LFO retrigs, so you can see them on there. So we don't need to set this up now. And if I bring this up, you can hear it's working, but we haven't set the filter up yet. So we're going to bring the frequency resonance down, and I'm going to change this to high pass and bring it all the way down. So now when I bring up the LFO depth amount, it's doing this. So let's just try that now. And if I just get rid of the kick and really increase this so you can hear it, you can hear that on the 1, 5, 9 and 13, it's getting rid of all of the low frequencies. And I want this to be quite transparent, so maybe a little bit faster on the release. And around there. So you can't hear it too much, what it's doing, but it's definitely getting the sub-frequencies out of the way of the kick. Right, let me show you using track 5 now, because we can kind of keep the opening and closing of this filter. That sounds a bit better. Right, so let's go to the LFO. This is already set up as well. And again, we're going to do the same thing. So this time, actually, we're going to go filter bass. So that's page 2, this one here. And then what we can do, same thing. Let's turn the kick off to start with. Check it's working. So this is without it. And with it, you can hear that it's getting rid of those sub-frequencies, getting them out of the way of the kick. To be fair, this sound here doesn't sound too bad alongside the kick anyway in the lower frequencies, but if we go down to a lower range, you can hear that now it's really competing with the kick. But by doing that, we clear it out of the way. So that's the idea behind that one. That works really well. It's also worth noting as well that you can combine option 3, the one that we just did, with option 1, which was the track volume trigs. Instead of using the LFO, you can go into the trigs and hold this down and adjust like this using the trig locks. And then you would also have to put in some trigless trigs and bring that back to 0 afterwards. Option 4 is all of the ones that we've just done, but on the effects track. Now, I don't use this one ever because I really love to use the effects track drive. Now, if I do the technique I'm going to show you, it means just sending certain elements into the effects track. You could send all of the elements into the effects track apart from the kick, and then you would get a sidechain on everything but the kick. Now, it sounds really good, but I like to use the drive, and the drive is not separate from this chain of effects and filters and amps. So what I like to do then is not do this, but I'm going to show you it anyway because it might be useful for you. Maybe you already have like an analog heat or something after the Syntakt, so it doesn't really bother you too much to not use the drive. But for me, the drive is probably the biggest selling feature of the Syntakt for me. It's great. Right, so what we can do is we can go back to the bass on 9 and we can bring up the effects block routing, and we can send just the bass into the effects block. By doing that, it means we still get to use our filter setup on the analog bass track. So the opening and closing, we still get to use that. But what we can now do is use either the filter or the amp to sidechain either the volume or the lower frequencies. Now, we can do it using the LFO again. And on the Trig page, you do have LFO retrigger, all that kind of stuff. Obviously, it's a little bit easier now because we don't have any extra notes. We just basically put the trigs on 1, 5, 9, and 13, and then these will retrigger the filter, the amp, or the LFO. What I'm going to do is, for this example, is just do the previous option, but use it on the effects track with the filter. So we're going to go for a high pass filter. We're going to bring it down. Now it's a lot easier this time because what you can do, in fact, let me just turn the amp on off for now so we don't lose any volume. See, if I put extra ones in there, it will re-trigger. So now we just put basically the trigs where we want it to re-trig, but now we have a decay. We'll just turn the kick off. So that's kind of like our release time. We also have an attack now as well. Let's just bring this down an octave. Actually, it's too much. Just to get those sub frequencies in. Get them a bit lower. So that's off, and then so that's one way of doing it. The other option is that you can obviously, like I said before, use the same LFO technique on the effects track if you prefer to do it that way. What we're going to do now is we are now going to look at option 5. So option 5 is using the effects track amp page. So let me just reload this actually. And let's just send it back into the analog effects block. And we're going to go to the amp page. So this is a little bit different this time as well. So if we go to the effects track, put in our re-triggers again. And I'm going to leave the amp trigger on this time. Now what we can do is basically sidechain just using this here. So you bring this depth amount up. That's off. And as you bring it up, you can see we've already got a sidechain duck in there as well. Cool thing about this is that if we bring the hold time all the way up to note, we can decide the length here. So 1/8 or 1/16. Now sometimes when I'm sidechaining, if the kick's quite short and snappy, I might just want to bring this back a little bit like this. And then go to the amp page and just add a little bit of decay time so it's a little bit softer. Or if we have, say, a long kick, let's just go to this kick here. So now we've got quite a long kick there. And then we can go back to the bass on the effects track now and turn this up to 1/8. Maybe back just a little bit. Just so the notes on 3, 7, 11 and 15, you can hear them coming back in and it's not cutting them off too much. Something like that. And that is obviously your depth amount, how much sidechain you want. By doing the amp, we've actually still got the filter available to us to do other things. And maybe, you know, you can still use the drive, because now we can just use that on the bass. But like I said before, I really love using the drive on the effects bus as an effects bus drive for everything, including the kick. But you can see it's now cutting the kick as well. And obviously we'd have to go into the track there to make that duck out of the way of the kick.